Desperate for money, she signed a contract to be his temporary wife. Little did she know, the man behind the deal was her long-lost childhood sweetheart. Fate, it seems, has a sense of humor. The faint hum of traffic outside Emma Brooks's modest apartment seemed to amplify the deafening silence within. She sat at the edge of her worn-out couch, staring at a towering pile of unopened bills and medical invoices on the coffee table. Each piece of paper was a grim reminder of how quickly life could unravel. Her father's stroke 6 months ago had drained the family savings, and the small bakery she ran in their neighborhood was teetering on the brink of collapse. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. Emma ran her fingers through her chestnut hair, her mind swirling with thoughts of how everything had gone so wrong. She had exhausted every option: loans, payment deferrals, even selling family heirlooms. Nothing had been enough. Now the landlord was threatening eviction, and the hospital was demanding payment before her father's next surgery. She was out of time. Her phone vibrated, snapping her from her thoughts. She hesitated before picking it up, dreading another reminder of her financial woes. Instead, the screen displayed a text from Riley, her best friend and roommate. "Are you really going to do this?" Emma sighed, clutching the phone tightly. Riley had been her rock through these trying months, but even she couldn't offer a solution to the mounting problems. And then there was this. 2 days ago, an envelope had been delivered to the bakery with no return address. Inside was a letter from a high-powered attorney representing an anonymous client. The proposal was as strange as it was tempting. Sign a 6-month contract to pose as the client's wife in exchange for an amount of money that could not only cover all her debts, but also secure her father's medical care indefinitely. At first, Emma had thought it was some kind of cruel joke. Who would make such an outlandish proposition? But a follow-up phone call from the attorney had convinced her it was genuine. She had even taken the contract to a lawyer, who assured her it was legally binding and safeguarded her rights. The idea was preposterous. Play the role of a billionaire's wife? Emma couldn't even afford a decent pair of heels, let alone pass as someone who belonged in a billionaire's world. But the numbers on the contract didn't lie. The upfront payment alone would be enough to settle the hospital bills. Another text popped up from Riley. "Think about what you're walking into. What if he's awful?" Emma stared at the screen, her heart heavy. She typed back, "What if this is the only way?" Riley's reply was immediate. "Just be careful, Em. I don't want you getting hurt." The next morning, Emma found herself sitting in a sleek glass-walled office high above the city. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the skyline, but Emma could barely focus on the scenery. Her fingers clutched the edges of her chair as the attorney, a gray-haired man with a polished demeanor, placed the contract before her. "Miss Brooks, as we discussed, the terms are straightforward. You will reside at Mr. Ashford's estate and accompany him to public functions as his wife. Your safety and well-being will be guaranteed, and any personal boundaries you wish to establish will be respected." Emma nodded, though her nerves were fraying with each passing second. "And the money? The upfront payment?" The attorney smiled. "The funds will be transferred to your account as soon as you sign. The remaining balance will be dispersed at the end of the 6-month term." Emma glanced at the document, her eyes scanning the pages she had already read a dozen times. Every word felt like it carried the weight of her family's future. Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen. Could she really do this? Could she sign away 6 months of her life to a stranger? Her mind raced with images of her father, frail and confined to a hospital bed. The bakery's shelves, once brimming with warm loaves and pastries, now empty. Riley's worried face as they tried to stretch their last dollar. The answer was clear. She signed her name. "Excellent," the attorney said, sliding the contract into his briefcase. "You'll meet Mr. Ashford tomorrow at his estate. A car will pick you up at 10 a.m. sharp." Emma hesitated. "Can you tell me more about him? What's he like?" The attorney's expression didn't change. "Mr. Ashford is a private man. I'm sure you'll find him intriguing." As Emma left the office, the weight on her shoulders lifted slightly. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. But beneath that hope was a gnawing sense of unease. Who was this mysterious man she had agreed to marry? The following day, Emma stood outside her apartment building, a sleek black car idling at the curb. She wore a simple dress and heels Riley had lent her, trying her best to look presentable. As the driver opened the door, she took a deep breath and stepped inside, her heart pounding in anticipation. The drive to the estate took nearly an hour, winding through lush countryside before arriving at a sprawling mansion perched atop a hill. The gates opened slowly, revealing manicured gardens, marble fountains, and a driveway lined with luxury cars. Emma couldn't help but feel out of place. When the car came to a stop, the driver gestured for her to step out. She smoothed her dress and exited, her eyes scanning the grand facade of the mansion. A butler greeted her at the door and led her inside, where the opulence was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and priceless artwork adorned every inch of the space. The butler guided her to a sitting room and offered her a glass of water. "Mr. Ashford will join you shortly," he said before disappearing. Emma sat on the edge of a velvet sofa, her hands folded nervously in her lap. She heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and her heart raced. When the door opened, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside. Her breath caught in her throat. Gabriel Ashford. The name had seemed familiar when the attorney first mentioned it, but now there was no doubt. It was him, the boy she had loved, the boy who had disappeared from her life a decade ago without a word. Except he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man, a powerful, commanding man who seemed worlds away from the carefree teenager she once knew. Gabriel froze when his eyes met hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the air between them crackling with tension. His expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable, his piercing blue eyes scanning her face. "Emma?" His voice was low, almost disbelieving. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Gabriel." He took a step closer, his jaw tightening. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," she replied, her voice steadier now. "But I think I already know." Realization dawned on his face, followed by a flicker of something that looked like regret. "You're the one they sent?" Emma swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. "You're the billionaire?" Neither of them moved, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy in the air. Emma felt a rush of emotions, confusion, anger, sadness, but above all, an overwhelming sense of betrayal. How could this be happening? Gabriel's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "We need to talk." Emma crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, we do." The room was cloaked in a tense silence, the kind that seems to stretch time into eternity. Emma sat stiffly on the velvet sofa, her arms crossed defensively as Gabriel stood a few steps away, his broad shoulders casting a shadow in the glow of the afternoon light. His expression betrayed a mix of emotions, shock, regret, and something she couldn't quite place. "You're the last person I expected to walk through that door," Gabriel said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, yet there was an undercurrent of unease. Emma let out a hollow laugh. "Funny, I could say the same thing." She studied him, her mind racing to reconcile the boy she once adored with the man standing before her now. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that accentuated his commanding presence, his face sharper, more mature. But those eyes, they were the same, piercing and intense, as if they could see right through her. "I didn't know it was you," he continued, his voice softening. "When I signed off on the contract, I had no idea who they'd choose." Emma's eyes narrowed. "And now that you know, what happens now, Gabriel?" He hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair. "We stick to the arrangement. We signed the contract, Emma. Backing out isn't an option." "Of course it isn't," she replied bitterly. "Not when you have the money to throw around like it's nothing." Her voice wavered, but she kept her gaze steady. "This is just a business deal for you, isn't it? Nothing more." Gabriel flinched as if her words had struck a nerve. "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" Emma shot back. She stood abruptly, unable to sit still under the weight of the tension. "Why are you even doing this, Gabriel? Why go to such lengths for a fake marriage?" For a moment he didn't answer. His jaw tightened and he looked away as if searching for the right words. Finally he sighed. "It's complicated." Emma crossed her arms. "Uncomplicated for me." He met her gaze, his expression resolute. "My grandfather left me the majority of the company in his will, but there was a condition. I have to be married by the time I turn 30 or the shares revert to my uncle. The board's been on my back for months. I needed a solution. Quickly." "And this is your solution?" Emma asked incredulously. "To hire someone to play your wife?" Gabriel's lips quirked into a faint, self-deprecating smile. "It's not ideal, I'll admit, but it's the only way to keep the company from falling into the wrong hands." Emma stared at him, her mind reeling. The Gabriel she remembered had been ambitious, always dreaming of building an empire, but she had never imagined him resorting to something like this. "And you?" Gabriel asked suddenly, his tone more probing. "What made you agree to this?" Emma's chest tightened. She didn't want to admit how desperate she had been, how the crushing weight of her father's medical bills had driven her to sign away 6 months of her life. But she also knew Gabriel wouldn't let her off without an answer. "I didn't have a choice," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father's sick. The bills are piling up. This was my last resort." His eyes softened, the tension in his posture easing slightly. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She shook her head, not wanting his pity. "It doesn't matter. What's done is done." Gabriel took a step closer, his gaze searching hers. "Emma, I had no idea you were—" "Don't," she interrupted, holding up a hand. "Don't act like this changes anything. You're still the man who disappeared without a word all those years ago. And now you want me to pretend to be your wife?" Her voice cracked and she looked away, blinking back tears. "I don't even know who you are anymore." His expression darkened, guilt flickering in his eyes. "You think I wanted to leave, Emma? You think it was easy for me?" She turned back to him, her anger flaring. "You didn't just leave, Gabriel. You vanished. No calls, no letters, nothing. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Gabriel's hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said quietly. "I thought leaving was what you needed." "What I needed?" Emma's voice rose. "You didn't even ask me what I needed. You just made that decision for both of us." Gabriel closed his eyes briefly, as if her words were physically painful. When he opened them again, there was a steely resolve in his gaze. "I can't change the past, Emma, but I can make sure you don't regret signing that contract. Whatever you need, I'll provide it." Her shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. "It's not about the money, Gabriel." "Then what is it about?" he pressed, stepping closer. Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's about trust, and right now, I don't know if I can trust you." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Fair enough, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. Just one chance." She hesitated, her mind warring with her heart. The rational part of her wanted to walk away, to tell him to find someone else, but the part of her that still remembered the boy who had once held her hand and promised her the world couldn't ignore the flicker of hope in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. "One chance, Gabriel. That's all you get." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That's all I need." The butler returned, announcing that dinner had been prepared. Gabriel gestured for Emma to follow him, and she did, her heart heavy with uncertainty. As they walked through the grand halls of the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a world far more complicated than she had anticipated. Over dinner, they discussed the logistics of their arrangement. Gabriel outlined the events they would need to attend together, the public appearances they would have to make. Emma listened quietly, nodding occasionally but keeping her thoughts to herself. She couldn't help but feel like an imposter, sitting at a table laden with crystal glasses and silver platters, discussing a marriage that wasn't real. When the meal was over, Gabriel escorted her to her room, a lavish suite that looked more like it belonged in a 5-star hotel than a private home. She stepped inside, marveling at the sheer opulence, but her mind was elsewhere. As Gabriel turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Good night, Emma." She met his gaze, her expression guarded. "Good night, Gabriel." When the door closed behind him, Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. The day had been a whirlwind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was in over her head. But as much as she wanted to walk away, she knew she couldn't. Not yet. For her father's sake, she would see this through. But as she lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ornate ceiling, one thought lingered in her mind. Could she survive 6 months in Gabriel Ashford's world without losing herself? Or her heart? The morning sun streamed through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow over the opulent room Emma now called her own. Despite the lavish surroundings, sleep had eluded her, leaving her restless and uncertain about the days to come. The reality of her situation hit her like a tidal wave. She was about to step into a role that required her to mask her emotions, her fears, and her unresolved feelings about Gabriel. Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock on the door. "Emma," Gabriel's deep voice called out, "breakfast is ready. We need to talk about our schedule for the week." Emma sighed, running her fingers through her tangled hair before throwing on a silk robe. She opened the door to find Gabriel standing there, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, exuding confidence and control. His expression softened slightly when their eyes met, but the tension between them remained palpable. "Good morning," he greeted, stepping aside to allow her to follow him. "I hope you're settling in." "It's different," Emma replied cautiously, trailing behind him as they made their way to the grand dining room. The table was already set with an array of breakfast options that seemed excessive for just two people. As they sat down, Gabriel poured himself a cup of coffee and gestured for Emma to help herself to the food. "We have a busy day ahead," he began, his tone all business. "There's a charity gala tonight and we'll need to make an appearance together. It'll be our first public outing as a married couple." Emma's stomach churned at the thought. "And what exactly does that entail?" she asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. Gabriel set his cup down and leaned forward slightly. "We need to convince everyone that our marriage is real. That means acting like a couple, smiling, holding hands, maybe even a kiss or two if the situation calls for it." Emma's eyes widened. "A kiss? Are you serious?" Gabriel arched a brow. "Emma, this arrangement only works if people believe it. The stakes are high and we can't afford any slip-ups." She nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right but still feeling uneasy about the charade. "Fine, but don't expect me to be some perfect Stepford wife." A faint smile tugged at Gabriel's lips. "I wouldn't dream of it." The rest of breakfast passed in relative silence, with Emma trying to mentally prepare herself for the evening ahead. Afterward, she retreated to her room, only to be met by a team of stylists waiting to transform her for the gala. It was a whirlwind of hair, makeup, and fittings, leaving her little time to dwell on her nerves. When she finally stepped into the sleek black gown chosen for her, Emma hardly recognized the woman staring back at her in the mirror. The dress hugged her curves in all the right places, its intricate beading shimmering under the light. Her hair was styled in elegant waves, and her makeup accentuated her features without overwhelming them. "You look stunning," Gabriel's voice came from the doorway, drawing her attention. He was standing there, his gaze appraising as he took her in. He was dressed in a classic tuxedo, exuding an air of sophistication and power that was impossible to ignore. Emma's cheeks flushed under his scrutiny. "Thanks," she murmured, unsure of how to respond. Gabriel stepped closer, offering his arm. "Shall we?" She hesitated for a moment before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. As they walked out to the waiting limousine, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a performance she wasn't entirely prepared for. The gala was held in a grand ballroom, its opulent decor rivaling even Gabriel's mansion. The room was filled with the city's elite, all dressed to the nines and exuding an air of wealth and privilege. As they entered, heads turned and whispers followed them. "Smile," Gabriel murmured under his breath, his lips barely moving. "Remember, we're the perfect couple." Emma forced a smile, trying to ignore the prying eyes and curious glances. Gabriel's hand rested lightly on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd, greeting various guests and exchanging pleasantries. "You must be the new Mrs. Ashford," an older woman remarked, her tone dripping with curiosity. Gabriel didn't mention he was seeing anyone. Emma's smile tightened, but before she could respond, Gabriel stepped in smoothly. "Emma and I have always preferred to keep our private lives private," he said, his tone warm but firm. "But now that we're married, I couldn't wait to share her with the world." The woman's expression softened and she nodded approvingly. "Well, you certainly make a striking couple." As the evening wore on, Emma found herself growing more comfortable in her role. Gabriel was a master at working the room, effortlessly charming everyone they encountered. Despite her initial reservations, she couldn't help but admire his charisma and poise. But her ease was short-lived. During a lull in the evening, she overheard a conversation that sent a chill down her spine. "I heard Gabriel's marriage was a strategic move," one man whispered to another, "some sort of arrangement to secure his position in the company." Emma's grip on her champagne flute tightened, her pulse quickening. She had known this was a sham from the start, but hearing it so bluntly stated brought her insecurities rushing to the surface. "Everything okay?" Gabriel's voice broke through her thoughts, his gaze concerned as he approached. Emma forced a smile, nodding quickly. "Fine, just needed a moment." He studied her for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly, but he didn't press further. "Let's get some air," he suggested, guiding her toward the terrace. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the stuffy ballroom, and Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Gabriel leaned against the railing, his expression unreadable. "Something's bothering you," he said quietly. "What is it?" Emma hesitated, debating whether to confront him. Finally, she spoke. "I overheard someone talking about our marriage, about how it's just a business move for you." Gabriel's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "And what do you think?" She looked away, her heart aching with a mix of frustration and sadness. "I think it's hard to pretend something is real when everyone around us knows it's not." Gabriel stepped closer, his voice low and earnest. "Emma, I know this isn't ideal, but we have to see it through, for both our sakes." She met his gaze, searching for any hint of sincerity. "And after 6 months? What happens then?" He didn't answer right away, his silence speaking volumes. Emma's chest tightened, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," he said finally. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was the only one he was willing to give. As they stood there, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Emma couldn't help but wonder if she had made a mistake. Could she really go through with this? Or was she setting herself up for heartbreak all over again? The weeks that followed the gala felt like a whirlwind. Emma found herself swept up in Gabriel's world, a realm of high-stakes business deals, charity events, and social gatherings where every word and gesture carried weight. Despite the challenges of their arrangement, they played their roles convincingly. To the outside world, they were the picture-perfect couple, but behind closed doors, the lines between pretense and reality began to blur. Emma spent her days navigating the intricacies of Gabriel's household, learning to anticipate his needs and keep up appearances. Gabriel, in turn, found himself drawn to her resilience and wit. Their shared moments, though fleeting, carried a familiarity that neither could deny. One quiet evening, as Emma explored the sprawling mansion, she stumbled upon a room she hadn't seen before. The door was slightly ajar, and curiosity got the better of her. Inside, she found a study filled with shelves of books and personal mementos. A single photograph on the desk caught her eye. A picture of a young Gabriel with a wide smile, his arms slung around a girl with messy hair and a mischievous grin. Emma's breath hitched. It was her. The realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just a chance reunion. Gabriel had known who she was all along. A flood of memories came rushing back. Summer afternoons spent exploring the woods, secret hideouts, and whispered dreams of the future. They had been inseparable once, until Gabriel had vanished without a word. "Emma!" His voice startled her, and she turned to see him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I see you found my study." She gestured to the photograph. "Why didn't you tell me? You knew who I was from the start, didn't you?" Gabriel sighed, stepping into the room. "I did, but I wasn't sure if you'd remember me, or if you'd even want to." Emma's eyes narrowed. "You didn't think I'd want to know the truth? After all these years, you just left." His jaw tightened, and for the first time she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "It wasn't my choice, Emma. My father moved us suddenly. I tried to reach out, but my letters were never answered. Eventually, I stopped trying." Her anger faltered, replaced by confusion. "Letters? I never got any letters." Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I sent them, I swear. I don't know why you never got them." The tension in the room was palpable as they stared at each other, both grappling with the weight of their shared history. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "So, this arrangement? Was it about the contract? Or was it about us?" Gabriel hesitated, his gaze searching hers. "At first it was just business, but seeing you again, it brought everything back. I wanted to protect you, even if it meant keeping the truth from you." Emma's heart ached at his words, torn between wanting to believe him and fearing more heartbreak. "You should have told me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I know," he admitted, stepping closer, "but I didn't want to hurt you, and now that you're here, I don't want to lose you again." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and she found herself fighting back tears. Despite her anger and the walls she had built around her heart, a part of her still longed for the boy she had loved. "I need time," she whispered, turning away. "This is all too much." Gabriel nodded, his expression pained. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." Over the next few days, Emma kept her distance, avoiding Gabriel as she tried to process her emotions. Memories of their past mingled with the present, leaving her conflicted. She couldn't deny the connection they still shared, but trusting him again felt like a leap of faith she wasn't sure she could take. One evening, as she wandered the garden, she found herself drawn to the bench where they used to sit as children. To her surprise, Gabriel was already there, staring up at the stars. He looked so different from the confident billionaire she had come to know, vulnerable, almost lost. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, her voice breaking the quiet. Gabriel turned, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's always been your favorite spot." Emma hesitated before sitting beside him, the silence between them heavy, but not uncomfortable. "Why are you here, Gabriel?" He sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Because this is the only place that feels real. Everything else, this house, the parties, the business, it's all just noise. But this reminds me of who I was before everything got so complicated." She studied him, seeing the cracks in his carefully crafted facade. For the first time, she glimpsed the boy she had loved, the one who had been taken from her too soon. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Pretending, lying, it's exhausting." Gabriel turned to her, his expression earnest. "Then don't pretend. Be yourself, Emma. That's all I've ever wanted." His words struck a chord, and for the first time in weeks she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to make this work. Not as part of a contract, but as two people rediscovering what they had lost. But as the night stretched on, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that their path would be anything but smooth. Secrets still lingered, and the weight of their past threatened to pull them under. Only time would tell if they could rise above it all and build something real. The days following their candid conversation were a cautious dance between Emma and Gabriel. While their shared memories provided a fragile bridge to connect them, the gap of years and unspoken truths loomed like a chasm they couldn't yet cross. The air in the mansion was heavy with an unspoken tension, an unresolved mixture of nostalgia, pain, and tentative hope. Emma threw herself into her role as Gabriel's temporary wife, attending meetings, hosting guests, and standing by his side at numerous social events. Despite the initial awkwardness, her natural charm and warmth won over even the coldest of Gabriel's business associates. Gabriel observed her with growing admiration, realizing that Emma's resilience and authenticity were qualities that had only deepened with time. One evening, as they returned from a charity gala, Emma decided she couldn't let her questions linger unanswered any longer. Sitting across from Gabriel in the car, she finally broke the silence. "Gabriel," she began, her voice steady but soft, "why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? You had so many chances." Gabriel leaned back against the plush leather seat, running a hand through his hair. "Because I wasn't ready," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "When I saw you again, I didn't know how to approach you. I didn't know if you'd hate me for leaving or if you'd even remember me." Emma frowned. "Of course I remembered you, how could I not? You were my whole world back then." Her words struck a nerve and Gabriel's expression softened. "I never forgot you, Emma. Not for a single day. When my father uprooted our lives, I fought against it. I wrote to you, but when you didn't respond, I thought you'd moved on." Emma's heart ached as she considered his perspective. "I never got those letters, Gabriel. Not one." The revelation left them both stunned. Gabriel's jaw tightened, frustration flashing in his eyes. "Then someone kept them from you. My father must have—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we're here now." Emma wasn't sure how to respond. The weight of their past, coupled with the complexities of their current situation, left her feeling overwhelmed. She turned to look out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and silver. "I don't know if this, us, is something we can fix," she said quietly. Gabriel reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "We don't have to fix anything tonight. Let's just take it one day at a time." Despite her reservations, Emma nodded, allowing herself to be comforted by his presence. For now, that was enough. As their arrangement continued, Emma began to notice subtle changes in Gabriel. The cold, calculated businessman she had first met seemed to soften in her presence. He smiled more often, laughed at her jokes, and even began to share pieces of his personal life with her. She learned about his late mother, whose memory still haunted him, and the pressure he felt to live up to his father's legacy. In turn, Gabriel grew more curious about Emma's life after they were separated. She shared stories of her family's struggles, the sacrifices she made to keep them afloat, and the dreams she had put on hold. Each revelation brought them closer, peeling back the layers of their guarded hearts. One afternoon, as they strolled through the gardens, Gabriel surprised Emma by leading her to a small greenhouse tucked away in a corner of the estate. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant, filled with the scent of blooming flowers. "This was my mother's sanctuary," Gabriel explained, his voice tinged with nostalgia. She loved orchids. She said they reminded her of resilience, how something so delicate could thrive in the harshest conditions. Emma ran her fingers along the petals of a vibrant purple orchid, marveling at its beauty. "She sounds like she was an incredible woman." "She was," Gabriel agreed, a faint smile on his lips. "She would have loved you." The comment caught Emma off guard, and she felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "You barely know me, Gabriel." "I know enough," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "And the rest, I'm willing to spend a lifetime learning." The sincerity in his voice left Emma speechless. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their past didn't have to define their future. But even as their bond deepened, the shadow of their contract loomed over them. The end date was approaching, and neither of them had brought it up. Emma couldn't ignore the gnawing anxiety that came with the thought of leaving. She had convinced herself that this arrangement was temporary, but the feelings she had tried to suppress were becoming harder to ignore. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in the library, Gabriel finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Emma," he began, his tone hesitant. "What happens after the 6 months are over?" She looked at him, her heart pounding. "I don't know. I guess I'll go back to my life and you'll move on." Gabriel frowned, leaning forward. "Do you really think I can just move on from you, after everything we've been through?" Emma bit her lip, unsure of how to respond. "This was supposed to be a business arrangement, Gabriel. Feelings weren't part of the deal." "Well, they are now," he said firmly. "And I'm not going to pretend otherwise." The intensity in his voice took her breath away, but before she could say anything, he reached for her hand. "I don't want this to end, Emma. I don't want us to end." Tears welled up in her eyes as she met his gaze. "What if we can't make it work? What if this is just a fantasy?" Gabriel shook his head. "It's not a fantasy, it's real, Emma. And I'm willing to fight for it. For us." The vulnerability in his words broke down the last of her defenses. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to hope that maybe, against all odds, they could find their way back to each other. But as they shared a tentative embrace, both knew that their journey was far from over. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they couldn't yet foresee. Still, in that moment, they chose to hold on to each other, determined to face whatever came their way together. The days following Gabriel's heartfelt confession were a delicate balance of hope and uncertainty. Emma and Gabriel, now more open about their emotions, spent more time together exploring the possibilities of their relationship. Their tentative steps toward reconciliation were filled with moments of warmth, laughter, and a growing sense of trust. But the looming reality of their contract's expiration date cast a long shadow over their fragile progress. One morning, as Emma sat by the kitchen window sipping her coffee, she noticed Gabriel pacing outside near the rose garden. He seemed lost in thought, his brows furrowed in concentration. Curious, she grabbed her jacket and stepped outside to join him. "Deep in thought?" she asked, her voice soft yet teasing. Gabriel turned to her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Something like that. I've been thinking about us." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "And what have you concluded?" Gabriel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That I don't want this, us, to be defined by a piece of paper. I want more than that, Emma." She studied him carefully, her own emotions swirling. "Gabriel, what you're asking, it's not just about the two of us. There's so much history, so many wounds." "I know," he replied earnestly, "but I also know that we've come too far to let fear hold us back. If we don't take this chance, we'll regret it for the rest of our lives." Emma looked away, her thoughts a tangle of hope and doubt. She wanted to believe him, to trust that they could overcome the pain of their shared past. But her own insecurities kept her from fully embracing the possibility of a future with Gabriel. "Let me show you something," Gabriel said suddenly, breaking the silence. He led her to the east wing of the estate, where an old storage room had been transformed into a gallery. The walls were lined with paintings, photographs, and sketches, each one a snapshot of Gabriel's life. "These are yours?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Gabriel nodded. "Art has always been my way of processing things. It's how I made sense of my emotions, especially after we were separated." Emma walked along the walls, stopping at a sketch of a young girl sitting under a tree. The details were intricate, capturing every strand of her hair, every curve of her smile. "That's me," she whispered, her fingers brushing the frame. Gabriel stood behind her, his voice soft. "I drew that from memory, the summer we spent by the lake. It's the only thing that kept me grounded when everything else felt like it was falling apart." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she turned to face him. "You kept this all these years?" "I kept everything," Gabriel admitted, "because no matter how much time passed, I couldn't let go of what we had." Emma was overwhelmed by the depth of his feelings. She had spent so long convincing herself that their connection was a thing of the past, yet here was proof that it had never truly faded. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Say you'll give us a chance," Gabriel pleaded. "Say you'll let me prove that we can make this work." Emma hesitated, her heart torn between fear and longing. "Gabriel, I want to believe we can, but what if it's too late? What if we've changed too much?" "We have changed," Gabriel acknowledged, "but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means we can build something even stronger than before." His words resonated with Emma, but she still couldn't shake her doubts. She needed time to process everything, to decide if she was ready to risk her heart again. That evening, as Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, memories of their childhood flooded her mind. She thought about the boy who had been her best friend, her confidant, and her first love, and she thought about the man he had become, someone who was still learning how to navigate the complexities of life and love. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Gabriel stood there, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I keep thinking about us, about what's at stake." Emma sat up, her heart pounding. And I don't want to waste another second pretending I don't care," Gabriel said, stepping into the room. "Emma, I love you. I've always loved you." The raw honesty in his voice took Emma's breath away. For a moment she could see the boy she had fallen in love with so many years ago, the boy who had never truly left her heart. "I love you too," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But love isn't always enough, Gabriel. We need trust, forgiveness, and a lot of patience." "We'll figure it out," Gabriel said, his voice steady. "Together." As they stood facing each other, the weight of their past began to lift. They knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years they felt a glimmer of hope. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face it together, one step at a time. The following days marked a turning point in Emma and Gabriel's lives. The tentative understanding they had reached was a fragile yet powerful step toward healing the wounds of their shared past. Gabriel, determined to prove his sincerity, dedicated himself to creating an environment of trust and transparency. For Emma, it was a journey of rediscovery, not just of the man she once loved, but also of her own strength and resilience. The first major test of their newfound connection came unexpectedly. Gabriel's business required him to host a gala at the estate, an event that would bring together influential figures from various industries. It was an important night, one that had been planned months in advance, and Gabriel needed Emma to stand by his side as his wife, a role she had agreed to as part of their contract, but now felt far more complicated. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Gabriel asked as they prepared for the evening. He stood in the doorway of her room, watching as she adjusted the strap of her emerald green gown. Emma met his gaze in the mirror, her expression calm but contemplative. "I don't know if I'll ever feel ready, but I'll try." Gabriel stepped into the room, his eyes softening as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "More than I deserve." Emma turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat at the sincerity in his voice. "You don't have to keep saying things like that, Gabriel." "But I mean it," he insisted. "You're the one who's been keeping this charade alive, and I owe you everything for that." Emma sighed, her fingers brushing against the pearls around her neck. "Let's just get through tonight." As they descended the grand staircase together, arm in arm, the murmurs of the guests grew louder. Emma could feel their eyes on her, their curiosity and judgment palpable. She had always been uncomfortable in the spotlight, and tonight was no exception. Gabriel, sensing her unease, leaned closer. "You've got this," he murmured. "Just follow my lead." The evening unfolded as expected, with Gabriel making rounds to greet his guests, while Emma played the role of the supportive wife. She was polite but reserved, carefully observing the dynamics of the room. It was a world she had never felt fully a part of, one where power and influence overshadowed genuine connection. But, as the night wore on, Emma began to notice something unexpected. Gabriel, who had always seemed so confident and composed, appeared vulnerable in his interactions. He was cordial and charismatic, but there was a tension in his demeanor that suggested he was carrying a heavy burden. It wasn't until later in the evening, when they found themselves alone on the balcony overlooking the estate gardens, that Emma finally addressed it. "You've been different tonight," she said, her voice quiet but probing. "What's going on?" Gabriel sighed, leaning against the railing as he looked out at the twinkling lights below. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about trust and forgiveness. It's made me realize how much I've let my own insecurities dictate my actions." Emma stepped closer, her gaze searching his. "What do you mean?" Gabriel turned to face her, his expression heavy with emotion. "I've spent so much of my life trying to prove myself, to my family, to my business partners, even to myself. And in the process, I've hurt the people I care about the most, including you." Emma's heart ached at his admission. She had always known that Gabriel carried the weight of his responsibilities, but hearing him acknowledge it so openly was a revelation. "You don't have to carry it all alone," she said softly. "I'm here, Gabriel. If you let me, I can help." Gabriel reached for her hand, his grip firm yet gentle. "I don't deserve your help, Emma. Not after everything I've put you through. But you're trying," she countered. "That's more than enough for me." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. One of Gabriel's assistants appeared, apologizing for the intrusion and informing him that a major investor was requesting a private meeting. Gabriel hesitated, torn between his obligations and the moment he was sharing with Emma. But before he could decide, Emma squeezed his hand. "Go," she said with a small smile. "I'll be fine." Reluctantly, Gabriel left, leaving Emma alone on the balcony. She leaned against the railing, her thoughts swirling. The vulnerability Gabriel had shown tonight was a stark contrast to the man she had known before, and it stirred something deep within her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that their love might still have a chance. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. She stretched and sat up, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. But as she made her way downstairs, she was greeted by an unexpected sight. Gabriel was in the kitchen, dressed casually in a sweater and jeans, flipping pancakes on the stove. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and Emma couldn't help but smile at the domestic scene. "Good morning," she said, leaning against the doorway. Gabriel turned, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "Good morning. I thought I'd try my hand at breakfast." Emma raised an eyebrow, amused. "Since when do billionaires cook their own meals?" "Since they realize they have a lot to make up for," he replied, his tone playful but sincere. As they sat down to eat, Emma couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. The walls they had built around themselves were slowly coming down, and for the first time, she felt like they were truly getting to know each other again. But the peace of the morning was shattered when Gabriel's phone buzzed with an urgent notification. He frowned as he read the message, his expression darkening. "What is it?" Emma asked, her heart sinking at his reaction. Gabriel set the phone down, his jaw tightening. "There's been a leak. Photos of us at the gala last night. Someone's trying to stir up trouble." Emma felt a wave of dread wash over her. "What kind of trouble?" Gabriel hesitated, clearly torn about how much to share. "It's not just about the photos. There's a rumor going around that our marriage is fake, and if it gains traction, it could jeopardize everything." Emma's mind raced. The contract, the facade they had maintained, the delicate balance they had achieved, it all felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. Gabriel met her gaze, his eyes filled with determination. "We fight back. Together." The next few days were a whirlwind of damage control. Gabriel's PR team worked tirelessly to manage the narrative, while Emma stood by his side, offering her support in any way she could. The experience tested their resolve, but it also brought them closer, forcing them to confront their feelings head-on. One evening, as they sat in the study reviewing statements, Gabriel reached for Emma's hand. "Thank you for standing by me," he said quietly. "I know this hasn't been easy." Emma looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "We're in this together, remember?" Gabriel smiled, his grip tightening around hers. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I promise I won't take it for granted." As the storm began to subside, Emma and Gabriel found themselves more united than ever. The challenges they had faced had strengthened their bond, and for the first time, they felt like true partners. But the road ahead was still uncertain, and they knew that their journey was far from over. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, determined to build a future that was worth fighting for. The weeks that followed tested Emma and Gabriel in ways they had never anticipated. The media storm surrounding the rumors of their fake marriage had subsided, but the experience left them both raw and exposed. Despite the challenges, they grew closer, their shared resilience creating a bond stronger than ever before. But the weight of their past and the secrets they still harbored lingered in the background, threatening to resurface at any moment. Gabriel was determined to make amends, not just to Emma but to himself. He threw himself into planning a surprise that would show Emma just how much he valued her. It wasn't just about gratitude or duty, it was about love, something he was finally ready to admit to himself. One evening, as Emma returned from her visit to the estate's garden, she found Gabriel waiting for her in the living room. He was dressed casually but held an envelope in his hand, his expression both nervous and excited. "What's this?" Emma asked, intrigued by the gleam in his eyes. Gabriel handed her the envelope. "Open it and find out." Emma carefully tore it open and pulled out a set of plane tickets and an itinerary. Her eyes widened as she read through the details. "Paris?" she whispered, her voice a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Gabriel nodded, his smile growing. "I thought it was time for a change of scenery. You've been through so much lately, and I wanted to give you something special, something that's just for us." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. "You didn't have to do this, Gabriel." "I know," he replied softly, "but I wanted to. You deserve it, Emma, more than anyone else I know." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Emma agreed. Within days, they were on Gabriel's private jet, soaring across the Atlantic toward the City of Light. The journey felt surreal, a stark contrast to the tension and uncertainty that had defined their relationship for so long. When they arrived in Paris, Gabriel spared no expense. They stayed in a luxurious penthouse suite overlooking the Seine, the glittering lights of the Eiffel Tower visible from their balcony. Emma was overwhelmed by the beauty of it all, but more than that, she was overwhelmed by Gabriel's effort to make her feel cherished. Their days in Paris were a whirlwind of romance and discovery. They strolled hand in hand along the Champs-Élysées, shared quiet moments in the gardens of the Palais Royal, and dined at intimate bistros where they could lose themselves in each other's company. For the first time in years, they felt free from expectations, free from the constraints of their past, and free to simply be together. One evening, as they stood on the Pont des Arts, watching the sunset over the Seine, Gabriel turned to Emma with a seriousness that took her by surprise. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Gabriel hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through, and I realized something. I've spent so much of my life trying to control everything, trying to protect myself from getting hurt. But with you, it's different. You make me want to take risks. You make me want to believe in love again." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had waited so long to hear these words, but now that they were here, she didn't know how to respond. "I know I've made mistakes," Gabriel continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "but I'm ready to make things right. I'm ready to let go of the past and focus on our future, if you'll let me." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she took in his heartfelt confession. For so long she had guarded her heart, afraid to let Gabriel back in, but in this moment, she realized that he was no longer the man who had hurt her. He had changed, and so had she. "I want that too," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "But it's not just about what you want, Gabriel. It's about what we want, together." Gabriel reached for her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Together," he echoed, a smile breaking through his seriousness. Their time in Paris became a turning point in their relationship. They returned home not as two people bound by a contract, but as partners ready to face the world together. The love they had rediscovered in the City of Light became the foundation for a new beginning, one built on trust, forgiveness, and a shared commitment to each other. But life, as they both knew, was rarely straightforward. Their newfound happiness was soon put to the test when they returned to the estate and found an unexpected visitor waiting for them. It was Gabriel's estranged father, Richard, a man who had been absent from his life for years. His sudden reappearance was a shock, not just to Gabriel but to Emma as well. "What are you doing here?" Gabriel asked, his tone cold and guarded. Richard sighed, his expression weary. "I heard about the rumors and the media frenzy. I wanted to make sure you were okay." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "You've been gone for years and now you suddenly care. Forgive me if I find that hard to believe." Richard's eyes flicked to Emma, who stood silently by Gabriel's side. "And you must be Emma," he said, his tone softening. "I've heard a lot about you." Emma nodded politely, unsure of how to respond. The tension between Gabriel and his father was palpable, and she didn't want to make things worse. Richard turned back to Gabriel, his expression earnest. "I know I've made mistakes, son, but I want to make things right. Please, give me a chance." Gabriel's eyes narrowed, his emotions a complex mix of anger and vulnerability. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be fine." "I know," Richard admitted, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." Emma placed a hand on Gabriel's arm, her touch grounding him. "Maybe this is an opportunity," she said gently, "for both of you." Gabriel looked at her, his gaze softening as he considered her words. He had always valued her perspective, and in this moment, he realized that she was right. If he could find it in himself to forgive Richard, perhaps it would bring him the peace he had been searching for. With a reluctant nod, Gabriel extended an olive branch. "Fine, but don't expect this to be easy." Richard smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you, son. That's all I can ask for." As they began the process of mending their fractured relationship, Gabriel and Emma found themselves navigating a new chapter, one filled with both challenges and possibilities. Together, they faced the uncertainties of the future, united by the love and resilience that had brought them this far. The weeks following Richard's arrival brought an air of change to the estate. While Gabriel had reluctantly allowed his father back into his life, their interactions were far from smooth. Old wounds lingered, and every conversation felt like a careful negotiation of emotions. But amidst the tension, there were moments of progress, fleeting but genuine, where Gabriel allowed himself to hope that perhaps his father's intentions were sincere. Emma played an instrumental role in bridging the gap between them. Her patience and empathy helped ease the awkward silences and soften the edges of Gabriel's guarded demeanor. She often found herself mediating their discussions, offering insights that neither man could see from their own perspectives. One sunny afternoon, Emma invited both Gabriel and Richard to join her for tea in the estate's garden. The blooming roses and chirping birds created a serene backdrop, one she hoped would encourage a more open conversation. "I think it's important to acknowledge where you both are right now," Emma began, her tone gentle but firm. "You don't have to resolve everything overnight, but taking small steps can lead to something meaningful." Richard nodded, his expression earnest. "She's right, Gabriel. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to be here for you now, in whatever way you'll let me." Gabriel took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the teacup in his hands. "It's not that simple," he said finally. "You left when I needed you most. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" "I do," Richard admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I was selfish, Gabriel. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us, but I see now that I was wrong. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life." The sincerity in Richard's voice struck a chord in Gabriel. While the pain of abandonment still lingered, he couldn't ignore the effort his father was making to repair their relationship. It was a start, and for now, that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, the dynamics at the estate began to shift. Richard stayed true to his word, consistently showing up and making an effort to connect with Gabriel. He even took an active interest in Gabriel's business ventures, offering insights that proved valuable in more ways than one. Gabriel, in turn, began to let his guard down. He started to see his father not as the man who had abandoned him, but as someone who was trying to make amends. While the scars of their past would never fully disappear, they began to heal, one conversation at a time. Amid these changes, Gabriel and Emma's relationship continued to deepen. Their shared experiences and growing trust brought them closer than ever, and Gabriel found himself imagining a future he had never dared to consider before. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the estate, Gabriel turned to Emma with a serious expression. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. Emma looked at him, her heart racing. "What about us?" Gabriel took her hands in his gaze unwavering. "I never imagined I could feel this way about someone again. You've changed my life, Emma. You've made me believe in love, in second chances, and I don't want to lose you." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she listened to his heartfelt confession. "Gabriel." Before she could say more, he pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a stunning engagement ring. The diamond sparkled in the moonlight, a symbol of their journey and the love they had found despite all odds. "Emma," Gabriel said, his voice trembling slightly, "will you marry me? For real this time. No contracts, no pretenses, just us." Emma's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the ring, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. She had dreamed of this, but she never thought it would actually happen. After a moment, she looked into Gabriel's eyes, her own filled with tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." A wide smile broke across Gabriel's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. They embraced, their love solidified in a moment they would remember forever. The news of their engagement spread quickly, bringing joy to everyone at the estate. Even Richard, who had been skeptical of Gabriel's ability to commit to love, was genuinely happy for his son. "I'm proud of you, Gabriel," Richard said one evening as they shared a quiet moment in the study. "You've grown into a man your mother would be proud of." Gabriel's chest tightened at the mention of his mother, but he managed a small smile. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot." As the wedding preparations began, the estate buzzed with excitement. Emma threw herself into planning the perfect day, while Gabriel focused on ensuring that every detail reflected their love story. From the flowers to the music, everything was chosen with care and intention. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a letter arrived that threatened to disrupt their happiness. It was addressed to Gabriel, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. Inside, the message was brief but chilling. "You don't know the whole truth about Emma. Be careful who you trust." The letter sent a ripple of unease through Gabriel. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to sabotage their happiness, and he resolved to uncover the truth. But as he began to investigate, he found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about Emma and about himself. Despite the challenges ahead, Gabriel was determined to protect the love they had fought so hard to build. With Emma by his side, he knew they could face anything, even the secrets that threatened to tear them apart. The letter weighed heavily on Gabriel's mind, casting a shadow over what should have been a time of pure joy. Despite his determination to protect his relationship with Emma, doubts began to creep in. He couldn't help but wonder who had sent the letter, and whether there was any truth to its cryptic warning. For days, Gabriel carried the letter in his pocket, rereading its ominous words over and over. He didn't want to believe there was anything about Emma he didn't already know, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Unable to shake his unease, he decided to confront Emma directly. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the estate, Gabriel pulled the letter from his pocket and handed it to her. "This arrived a few days ago," he said, his voice tense. "I need you to see it." Emma took the letter and read it, her brows furrowing as she absorbed its message. When she finished, she looked up at Gabriel, her expression a mix of sadness and resolve. "You think I'm hiding something?" she asked quietly. "It's not that I think you're hiding something," Gabriel said, his tone softer now. "But someone clearly wants me to believe you are. I just need to know if there's anything at all. You haven't told me." Emma hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Gabriel, there's something I've been meaning to tell you, but I didn't know how to bring it up. It's about your father." Gabriel's eyes widened in surprise. "My father? What about him?" Emma glanced down, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "A few months before we reconnected, I met Richard. It was a chance encounter. I had no idea who he was at the time. He told me about his regrets, about wanting to reconcile with you. When I realized he was your father, I encouraged him to reach out to you." Gabriel stared at her, his mind racing. "So you've been in contact with my father this whole time? Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to interfere," Emma said, her voice pleading. I thought it was something you two needed to work out on your own. But when Richard came back into your life, I hoped it would help you heal. I never meant to keep it from you, I just wanted what was best for you." Gabriel let out a slow breath, his initial shock giving way to understanding. "I wish you had told me sooner," he said finally, "but I can see why you did what you did." Emma reached for his hand, her eyes filled with emotion. "I've never lied to you, Gabriel. I love you, and I would never do anything to hurt you. Please believe that." Gabriel squeezed her hand, a sense of relief washing over him. "I believe you," he said, "and I'm sorry for doubting you. Whoever sent that letter was trying to create a rift between us, but they failed." With the air cleared between them, Gabriel felt a renewed sense of determination to uncover the truth behind the letter. He shared his suspicions with Richard, who was equally disturbed by the anonymous warning. "This could be someone from my past," Richard said, his expression grim. "I made a lot of enemies when I walked away from my responsibilities. It's possible someone is trying to use this to get to me, or to you." Together, they began investigating potential sources of the letter, poring over old records and reaching out to trusted contacts. Meanwhile, Gabriel and Emma continued with their wedding plans, refusing to let the mysterious warning derail their future. As the wedding day approached, Gabriel received a call from an old friend who had been helping with the investigation. "We traced the letter back to someone working for one of your father's former business partners," the friend said. "It seems they wanted to sow discord between you and Emma as revenge for Richard's past actions." Gabriel relayed the information to his father, who was visibly shaken. "I thought I had left that life behind," Richard said, "but it seems my mistakes are still casting shadows over your life." "It's not your fault," Gabriel said firmly. "What matters is that we know the truth now. They didn't succeed in driving a wedge between Emma and me, and they never will." The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect reflection of the hope and happiness Gabriel and Emma felt as they prepared to start their new life together. The estate was transformed into a breathtaking venue, with flowers and lights creating an atmosphere of enchantment. As Emma walked down the aisle, her eyes locked on Gabriel's, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for everything they had overcome to reach this moment. Gabriel's heart swelled with emotion as he watched her approach, her beauty and strength taking his breath away. When they exchanged vows, their words were filled with love, honesty, and a promise to face whatever challenges life might bring. Gabriel spoke of the lessons he had learned from his past mistakes, while Emma shared her gratitude for the second chance they had been given. "I stand here today not just as your wife," Emma said, her voice steady and full of emotion, "but as your partner, your confidant, and your greatest supporter. Together, we can face anything." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the guests erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the estate. For Gabriel and Emma, it was a moment of triumph, a testament to the power of love and resilience. At the reception, Richard approached the newlyweds with a heartfelt toast. "To Gabriel and Emma," he said, raising his glass, "may your love continue to grow stronger with each passing day. You've shown me the true meaning of family, and I'm so proud of both of you." As the evening wore on and the celebrations continued, Gabriel and Emma stole a quiet moment together under the stars. "We did it," Emma said, leaning against Gabriel. "We made it through everything." "We did," Gabriel agreed, wrapping his arm around her. "And I wouldn't change a thing. Every challenge, every setback, it all brought us here." Looking up at the night sky, they felt a sense of peace and fulfillment they had never known before. Their journey had been anything but easy, but it had led them to a love that was worth fighting for. And as they stood together, ready to face whatever the future might hold, they knew one thing for certain: their story was just beginning. If you enjoyed this heartfelt journey of rediscovered love and second chances, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories that touch the heart.